Shawn Wells, for as many mutual
Boomer.
connections as we have, this is a pleasure just getting to have this conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited as well. It is funny that we have so many friends in common and people that I consider not just knowledgeable but really good human beings, and they all think highly of you, and I think they think highly of me. So it's I think it's going to be a great friendship, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. More than just this conversation, for sure. So, as a person who also travels quite a bit, I have to ask, what has 2020 meant for you? Because I read somewhere that, actually, you have this in your book, you're scheduled to travel 300 days a year, which is a lot, my friend. So, what did 2020 turn out like for you?
Yeah, the years prior, it was 100 days, and then it became 200 days, and then 2020 was supposed to be 300 days, and I was chasing achievement. I have all the credentials and letters after my name, and I was trying to get into bigger and better masterminds. I was trying to get on bigger and better stages, bigger and better podcasts. And there's nothing inherently wrong about trying to level up to some degree, but uh, I think my intentions behind it were not true to myself all the time. I feel like I was searching for love outwardly by accomplishment and not realizing that I can get love for free by just putting the right people around me and just opening up and connecting with deep quality relationships. So I was pushing really hard. It's called in Peru, they talk about the puma, the condor, and the snake, and these different energies. And the puma is like that drive for achievement, that drive to accomplish. And the snake is a grounded energy. It's shedding, it's transition. Um, and then the condor is like the strategic, like oversight, like view from above kind of thing. And you have to take on different energies at different points in your life. There isn't, one that's inherently better than the other, but I was definitely stuck in what they even call wounded puma, which a lot of entrepreneurs are. Some of our drive to accomplish comes from trauma and insecurity. And we accomplish amazing things. And, we outwork other people. We have incredible drive, 80, 100-hour work weeks, whatever, build businesses, acquire wealth, employ a lot of people. So many entrepreneurs I know are so amazing, at just raw accomplishment. It's incredible to watch. But there's a pain that's underlying, and there's a desire to keep working to almost cover it up. And I was so blessed that 2020 allowed me to really take a massive step back and go from wounded puma to snake when I was in these journeys that I was doing quite a bit. We can talk about, and then the condor to really look at what is serving me. Like what are these things that are actually lighting me up? I was so busy that anyone would say, you want to do the speaking engagement, you want to do like this TV show, do this thing, like yes, if it's a thing and I've got an opening, yes. And I started looking at it, I'm like, TV thing was cool for like my sizzle reel, but a 3 minute you know blurb of like me saying yes, keto's cool, all right, back to you, Bob. And it's like, that was like, why did I just do that? It's like, and I love going deep on podcasts. And I started like thinking about what actually lights me up, what does serve me. And I really started putting boundaries around things, getting rid of things. I had FOMO around, I was getting scientific advisory board requests all the time, and just yes, 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 yes. And a lot of them I just didn't like. I didn't like the energy of the people. But I was worried. I was worried I might miss out on something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so good going into 2020 and doing journeys, putting mentors around me, mentoring others, getting a couple therapists, and taking this time to really just do a deep dive into myself. And it was a game changer for me, and it really changed the shape of the book I was writing. It led to me rewriting it several times, now even re-recording it. But it's now something I'm more proud of. I'm in a position now where I'm very, very much at ease. I feel like I can manifest instead of like clawing for things, scraping and reaching and like desiring, and I'm going to show them, to now it's like, I am. Would you like to join me?
Mhm.
And it's a very different energy, and I'm so proud that I got to move through that. And there's no way I would have done that unless it was a pandemic that stopped everything, unless I had like some massive health situation, like I got cancer or heart attack, or I'm so blessed that it was not that,
Mhm.
and that this happened. And I'm just so thankful. Obviously I don't like the idea of the negative repercussions of a pandemic, but of what it allowed me to do in 2020 was massive, like a full shift. So yes, it was amazing.
And I think there's a lot of people, and I was actually surprised at this, but when I started polling people who have a similar lifestyle, traveling all the time, always looking at achievement, the next promotion, the next raise, whatever it is. There's a lot of people that saw 2020 in that way, and myself included. I've never spent more than 3 weeks in the same city since I was probably 25 years old. And so this was quite an enlightening period for myself as well. Now, I want to go, at one point you made there was, and I do find this is a very common thing among entrepreneurs, is that there's this desire to achieve around covering up either trauma or past experiences, desire to prove people wrong. In your particular situation, if you're open to going down this route, well, do you mind just setting the stage for us in terms of what kind of led to Shawn Wells, the world's greatest formulator?
Yeah, and you're right. And when I've been in these mastermind circles, when you're really getting raw with especially male entrepreneurs, um, there's a lot of pain there, and we're taught to suppress it. You're a bitch if you cry, right? You're a wussy if you cry, if you show any weakness, especially in this circle, like where it's like, we're taught to hustle and grind. You don't show weakness. You grind your way through it,
Yeah.
through the pain.
Mhm.
That's how you earn your badge. That's what I was taught. And that's what my father was taught. And so it was a very disciplined, difficult childhood. Um, but it's not his fault either. That's what his dad was incredibly tough on him. And it's just one of those things that we're taught as men and as human beings, to just be tough, tough it out, stick it out, grind it out. Don't cry. Let's go. Come on. You know, push through it. And that's what I was doing. I was grinding away. And if you think about grinding and pieces breaking off and heat, and you breaking down, your head's down, you're miserable. Just keep pushing through it. And this is the worst advice ever. Hustle, yes. Hustle, sure. There's times to be in that sympathetic nervous system mode where you hustle for it. Absolutely.
Mhm.
But grind, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. Like, one of the greatest aspects of self-love to me that I learned is setting boundaries.
Mhm.
And I put boundaries around things that are energy draining to me. And grinding is most certainly energy draining. And I will also say that you're quite often, I believe, in the right place, right time, all the time,
Mhm.
but your head's down. You're just not seeing it. Your head's down. You're tired. You're not thriving. You're not connecting with the world around you. You're not connecting with these opportunities that are right there. I don't know if it's so much that you're just manifesting it as it is like you're connecting and your head's up and you're aware, like it's one of those things that I'm kind of like learning my way through. But going back to my childhood, I was also overweight. I was bullied. uh, I considered suicide quite often.
Mhm.
I just was a kid that would come home and eat sugar cereal and watch TV and play video games and just try and hide away.
Mm.
And then into college, like I got anorexic. I went from like 300 pounds at 6'2" to 150 pounds.
What was that what caused that transition? Was it just sort of
Oh,
like, hey, I need to lose this weight, and then it became the extreme?
it was just powerful in college when I had like maybe 3 friends and I felt very alone, and they weren't even deep friendships, and I just felt like I was dangling on like a little cord out in space.
This is at
And
Babson, right?
yeah,
Okay.
I started losing weight, and that was good. And then you had mentioned in my book, I talk about this doctor that really changed my perspective. But it was around that time that I was like working out, using supplements, and I was getting great change, but it ended up going almost in a really unhealthy direction, like where I was weighing myself like right after I peed, and it's just, I wanted to get like as emaciated as I possibly could, because I just thought fat was the worst thing ever, and I hated my body. And so I went that other direction. There was body dysmorphia, and then I bounced back and had like a lot of working out, like 5-6 days a week and 4 hours a day, and 2 times a day, and all the supplements. And I got orthorexic. I was like, as soon as I was done working out, I'm going catabolic. I've got to like eat protein immediately. This is the window, the whole thing. And so there was a long period of my life that I had a lot of body dysmorphia and self-loathing.
Mm.
And but yes, I did meet a doctor when I was about halfway through at Babson, a business specialty school, and he changed my life path. I was telling him about supplements and working out, and then I was getting all these benefits, and I was like super passionate about it. And he looked at me and he's like, "Is that right if I tell you something?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And at this time, I didn't have exposure to like entrepreneurs and all these people online accomplishing all these things. I didn't know the Oprahs and Tony Robbins and all these people. I just, like, for me, like a doctor was like, wow. And so he drew out this lifeline for me. Like, I was 20 at the time, and he drew it out to 80. And he said, "Why not be happy between here and here?" He could tell like that the business thing was what I was doing, to please my parents, or doing to please the world. And like this stuff really interested me and lit me up. And for him as a doctor that has no responsibility to say that to me, for him to do that for me was life changing. And it was someone that at that time, like, I would take their thoughts and opinions very seriously, because I looked at him as super successful and accomplished. And that that really opened the door for me to say, I can go do this. Like, I literally, like, I don't have to stay on this path. Like, everyone else was telling me that was stupid, that if I went back to school, you just need to go get a job, get out there and work. But this guy like kind of gave me permission to go pursue what was now my passion and my dream. And that allowed me to become all the things that I've become. So it's one of those things that, like, there would be no quote unquote world's greatest formulator, or the book that I have, or all the people I've impacted, or us talking this podcast, without that one guy going out of his way to tell me something that changed my life. Like that, I look at that as so profound, and it impacts me all the time when I think back on it, that I can have that impact on someone, whether they realize it now or not, or whether I realize it now or not. My words and my actions can greatly change someone's life path.
Yeah.
That's powerful for me.
I mean, it sounds incredibly powerful in general. It's also, I imagine at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Shawn, is probably quite terrifying because you're breaking a barrier, and it sounds like we may have had similar upbringings in terms of what parents wanted for us. And breaking that barrier can be very, very challenging. Was the doctor involved in some of the, like, at least helping you through those conversations with some of the key people in your life, or did you just kind of, bull in the china shop style, go through it?
Yeah. Yeah, more the bull in the china shop thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I was. Like, I think I just, and same with like my weight, like you were talking about before, I just hit this point where I was so disgusted with myself. And I think I took so many hateful comments about, because I was not only overweight, but I have a gynoid fat distribution,
Mm-hmm.
which is, big butt basically, and big legs. And so for that, I got attacked a lot. And girls made fun of me a lot, and the guys would laugh about it a lot. And it just hit a point where it's like, it was unhealthy, what I was thinking about myself, but it led to pretty radical change in a very short period of time. And I have the power to do that. Like, that's like, you know, when we're talking about the entrepreneur drive, it's very similar. Like, I will outwork, outlast, outpush just about anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it can, there's times when that's a powerful skill, and then there's times that's kind of your undoing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very unhealthy for me, and it ended up leading to a lot of health issues for me, where I had autoimmune issues with Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue,
Oh,
Hashimoto's. I couldn't get out of bed for 6 months
wow.
in pain and inflammation, and I again thought of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought my life was over. All this studying, this was while I was getting my master's at Chapel Hill in nutrition and biochemistry. Um, I thought all this work, all this effort, all the sacrifices, it's all for nothing. I'm just going to spend my life in bed in pain and not able to function. Um, and then that led me to keto and a bunch of other things that really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that, like, all these people that are really good at what they do, there's like some real reasons behind it. There's some real passion behind it. And there was other points in my life. It was about 8 years ago that I got a brain tumor. And again, at the same time, I was like at Dymatize. I was working 80 hours a week. I was getting out of my good habits because it was night and day. We were pushing to sell the company. We eventually did sell it in 3 years to Post for $425 million. And so the air around Dymatize wasn't just work, work, work. It's like push, push, push for this goal. And that sucked the life out of me too. I mean, again, accomplished great things, but was not healthy. And then I got a brain tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where each point, like, I've learned to, like, wait, I need to stop. I need to reevaluate. And so it just seems like every now and then in my life there's like something that my body is saying, like, stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to look at this. Like, all these things to do, and you can learn all these things, and you can put the right experts around you. Let's reimagine what your life looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been very helpful to me to have those moments to stop. And now I'm very appreciative of my body. Most of my life I've hated my body,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm actually thankful to my body that, despite me hating it, and with all the pushing I did and driving and accomplishment I did, that it lasted through all that.
Yeah.
And it's now served me. And now I'm just thankful that it's here, that it survived all that hell that I put it through mentally and physically. It's incredible.
So it seems like over the course of life, you had a number of signals that say, like, hey, this bowl in the china shop going back to that metaphor, is not the right approach. But similar to many people in this entrepreneurial position, you kind of re-rack, deal with the signal at hand, and then almost re-engage the bowl. Um, whether it be body dysmorphia or just sort of the constant foot on the gas pedal, and you mentioned journeys earlier, so I'm happy to go down that if you feel like this is the right time. But what kind of got you to this state of homeostasis? for lack of a better word, where you got more comfortable with the body fat distribution. I certainly have something similar, big thighs, for instance. But what got you more comfortable with just Shawn Wells as a person?
I think when I was able to grant myself some grace in the plant medicine space, but two, when I granted myself accomplishment, achievement, and I'm proud of me, instead of searching for all these people that I was wanted to give me that accolade, especially my father.
Mm-hmm.
There was one moment I went into with this really great hypnotherapist. He works with like very elite poker players. His name is Elliot Rowe.
I have a
And
connection to Elliot, so I'm familiar
oh,
with his
cool.
work. Yeah.
So he did some regression with me and took me back to a moment that was, you know, a traumatic argument in my childhood, and he had me, you know, I'm sure you've heard of like the, you know, can you hug that child there, like that's you, right? And that was powerful. I mean, and that makes sense. You've probably heard that before. I was already very emotional at that point. And then he said, what does that child think about you? And that's when I had like a full on breakdown. And and that child was in awe of me and so proud of me. And that, to give myself that, I think, you know, for 40 some years, I'd been driving for that. To allow myself that was powerful. And that's when I stopped worrying about the things, the outward things, the aesthetics, the, you know, what people think of me. I'm just proud of me. And like the desire to please other people started fading away. And then in the plant medicine space, it was similar too. My first journey was with mostly people I didn't know, maybe about 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a very, it's very important that you create like a safe container. You know, the whole set and setting thing, like you need to go in with the right mindset. You need to have people that are creating the right setting and have a desire to help you set intentions and then do integration afterwards. But it's also, it needs to be a safe container that you feel comfortable in, that you can be seen in, that you can be vulnerable in. And you need to trust the facilitators that they have your best interest in heart, and then that you are taking the right plant medicine in the right amounts at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And they know your medical history, they know your emotional history and all this stuff. And so they can guide that. And with me, they started me slow, and I had like kind of 2 re-ups, you know, during the night for psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me, you know, as someone who wasn't experienced, to kind of slowly, you know, move into it and not feel overwhelmed. And what matters is that you lean into the medicine, that
Mm-hmm.
you like, it's very easy that you can actually like lean out and not have it take any effect unless you take massive hero doses that just
Yeah.
overwhelm. So I liked being able to kind of lean in. And one of the really cool things is, you know, I've been all these masterminds, like I said, and leveling up, and people, you know, I'm trying to like talk to the people that I think are like a level above me. And then there's, of course, people that are trying to talk to me that think I'm a level up. And it's like this, you know, what can they do for me? What am I doing for them? Kind of exchanges that you're starting to think in this mindset. But I was in this room and everyone was just loving. They didn't know who I was, and people gravitated to me, and I was able to just access like this full on childlike playful self, and have people just interact with me and do cuddle puddles and all this stuff. And and I realized that like that was the moment that I realized that love is free, love is here. Like I don't have to go out and achieve and earn it. It's right here if I want it. These people don't even know me, and they're spending time with me because they love me, because they like who I am. I'm like, I can have this anytime I want this. And I'm spending all this time, money, energy, like trying to go get this. You don't realize that's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do. Because this thing, this love, like is worth more than the cars and houses and status and all the shit. It's what you really want in your heart of hearts, is to be appreciated and to give love and to feel love from yourself and others. And so that was so powerful for me. And then to also realize in that, in this space that night, that I can be anything I want right now.
Mhm.
If I want to just stop being a formulator and just go travel the mountains, I can go do that. I mean, there's repercussions for that, but I could just go do that. And there was a freedom in that, just realizing that I'm not like on like a set path, that
Mhm.
kind of like that doctor gave for me. I gave it to myself that night in the plant medicine, that I can be anything I want. And if I keep wanting to change and kind of go down this psychedelic, path and enlighten people that way, then that's what I'm going to do. Like
Mhm.
whatever lights me up and interests me, and those people that are interested in me will follow me, or I'll get new people that are interested in this new thing I'm in.
Mhm.
And I just need to chase my passions and find the things that light me up, and not worry about pleasing everyone.
Mhm. It's very powerful. Um, Shawn, I think there's something that we should touch on around psychedelics because I've talked openly about my use of them in the past, and I think it's, much as it sounds with you, accelerated my own personal growth. What do you think is most misunderstood about um, some of these journeys, plant medicine, psychedelics in general? And what do you think people out there should know about them, um, even before embarking or even doing their own research?
I think there's a difference between these plant medicines that can be teachers and just what people consider as like recreational addictive drugs that are just euphoria in and of
Mhm.
themselves, or a rush.
Mhm.
Um, this is very different from that. Like these plant medicines I've used, I would not say are addictive, especially in the way that I've used them. When I go into a container, and again, I have facilitators. I do not do these things really on my own at this point yet.
Well said. Yeah.
I think I will at some point, but I need to feel comfortable as myself to be a facilitator for others, that I can do that for myself.
Mhm.
So I am being facilitated in a way where I'm learning my reaction in this space, learning how to maneuver in this space. And these are tools. They're all tools, I would say, largely to help you tap into higher self and break down ego constructs. There's a lot
Mhm.
of powerful constructs that we build over time that help us survive, but they do not help us thrive.
Mhm.
Like I was talking about before, like it helps protect us from, being wounded. These stories and these, realities, quote unquote, that we take on, these constructs. Or in the idea of Byron Katie, it's the stories. Or in the idea of Don Miguel Ruiz, it's the agreements that we're making over time, right? So it's peeling those away. And I stopped feeling, one of the biggest, most powerful learnings for me too during plant medicine is that I always felt like I was broken. And I feel like biohacking, there's almost like insinuation that you are broken, like that you need to fix it, you need to hack it, quick time, let's find the shortcut.
Mhm.
There's, on one hand, there's that quick fix of biohacking. On the other hand, there's the grinding it out for years and suffering. And we love these mindsets.
Mhm.
But in the middle, there's like a joy, a peace, a centeredness of, you are not broken. You were born perfect and beautiful. And over time, we built some of these constructs that we just need to break down and move away. Just like we get the car polished
Mhm.
and the car looks great. Like we just need to clean it up from time to time. And I think the ego needs a reset from time to time. They call it like ego death sometimes when you're in some of the more intense journeys,
Hmm.
where you can really see past all that stuff and you forgive. You forgive others, you forgive yourself. You have a clear view of what your truth is. So much of our anger and frustration that we're feeling for other people is truly with ourselves, because we're not aligned. We're not in alignment with our truth, and that upsets us. But
Yeah.
that's very deep within. And there's a bunch of ego construct stuff that's telling you it's all about these people around you. They're screwing with you. They're fucking you over. They're jerks. Why would they do this to me? You didn't set out the ground rules. You didn't lay out the communication. You weren't real with yourself. You didn't put the right people around you. You didn't take the time to think this through.
Hmm.
Who are you mad with? You're mad with yourself, and you're just projecting it out. You have that resentment outwards. And it's because you have so much expectations, and expectations create resentment. You really should go through life with a whole lot less expectations,
Hmm.
have like a creative, playful heart, and say, like, the universe is working for me. Let's see what happens here. But that's the biggest learning, and with the plant medicine, like, again, it's just so key to have really good facilitators. You go in and you set intentions. You say, this is my plan for what I'm going to get out of this journey. I've been working through this, and I would like to get some answers to this.
Hmm.
And it helps when you set that intention. I mean, just like in everyday life, like if you're working on your gratitude journal, or whatever it is, like, make a plan for the day, and by and large you'll achieve it.
Hmm.
And then on the other side of your journey, you have integration, and that integration not only takes place that day with those facilitators who are very skilled at helping you through that, like, what does this mean, what is it that you learned, but like, how do you apply it to your life in the real world for the next coming days, months, and years, for real change, so that it isn't just an escape. It isn't just, I'm trying to get away from my real life. If you're around the right people, these become powerful tools, but it depends how you use them. And yeah, if you were just listening to a Led Zeppelin album in the 70s, maybe you just be like, hey man, cool, like, this music's great, have that kind of experience.
Hmm.
But with the right intentions and the right environment, with focused facilitators, it can be extremely different and very powerful for helping initiate change and just break down those barriers. Like with MDMA, it started with couples actually here in Dallas, helping them with their marriages, and
Hmm.
just having that clarity between them, that honest love between them, breaking down those constructs so that they can talk in a real way.
Hmm.
And that's where these medicines are so profound, and we're seeing that. I mean, these guys, with maps, like, that works with MDMA, you're seeing people in 3, maybe 6 sessions max, moving through very traumatic PTSD, like,
Hmm.
just past it. And you don't see that with traditional medicines. This is a very different thing.
Yeah. I'm very excited as a person who has done a number of psychedelic journeys, and seen the benefits of myself. I'm very excited that as you mentioned, sort of phase 3 of MDMA trials gets passed, hopefully very soon, through the FDA, just what that means for the rest of the world. Coming back to these journeys, and you hinted at the integration part, but for me, and Shawn, I'd love to hear your viewpoint here. Like, the psychedelic journey itself shows me what's possible, but if I do nothing on the back end, it's almost hard to implement what I saw in that experience. I would love to hear if you feel the same way, and also what you do personally in those integration steps afterwards.
Yeah, that's where I did one clarogenic, as it was called, experience, in Nashville, where they use 20 different plant medicines, and it's
Wow.
yeah, it's in for 6 hours. You're wearing a mindfold, it's called, and listening to journey music, and you just channel stuff to your from your higher self, and it's just recorded.
Mhm.
And what I loved with this was I was forgiving people. I was coming up with business ideas, forgiving myself, saying, Shawn, you kick ass. I love you. Like all this, it was just beautiful to just be in that space. And it wasn't, it was less altered and it was just more enlightenment. It was a very interesting experience. It was very different than other medicines I've used. And I had to go back and listen to myself for these 6 hours and then transcribe it myself. Of course, I could have used some app like, Otter, Google Recorder, or whatever, like to just, translate it and transcribe it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was supposed to do it myself and make notes and hear my own voice. It was so powerful to do that, to listen to your own voice, because so much of like in our lives, our voice is a negative voice, the inner critic and, the imposter syndrome. And if anyone talked to, you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're harsh. We're harsh. So to hear like your voice be so beautiful, so loving, to give yourself so much grace, it's transcendent. It's very powerful to hear that, and it shifts you. But to take these notes and say, here's what I'm saying, so I'm going to apply, like I need to put these things in action. This is my higher self saying, this is what I need. This is what I need to feel love, to feel positive energy, to feel whole, to feel lit up. So I'm going to start taking steps towards these things. And I'm going to start removing some of the things that are blocks for that. And it's just looking at these items on a daily basis and saying, how can I move closer to these? And then also checking in with someone like your facilitator, monthly or whatever it is, and saying, here's where I'm at. What do you think? And obviously they're very skilled at working with people and helping them move in those directions, even through things that seem traumatic and very difficult to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel trapped a lot in your life. Like you feel like I was saying before, that everything's on rails and you can't escape. And it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And when you work with a good facilitator and you work with yourself and break down the constructs, you see that you have way more freedom than you're allowing yourself. And you see that you have way more love than you're allowing yourself, both coming in and going out. And so that can be massive, and change, I will say, like gains momentum over time,
Mm-hmm.
like where these things just start building. Like once you get that solid foundation, they start building, and then you start facilitating for others to some degree. Like, I started a mastermind group with me and 5 other friends, and that just kind of came out of all this. Like now I, check with them daily on Signal, and then we do like a once a week Zoom, and we're helping each other out, holding each other accountable. A lot of this just came from that
Mm-hmm.
space, and now this is helping my growth further.
Amazing. Shawn, if it's okay with you, I want to talk a little bit because up to this point, I've kind of teased people with the supplement sort of topic, but I want to go a little bit into that and then get into the book a little later. But when it comes to supplements, I think there's a lot of people that are both skeptics, but also there's a lot of, shall we say, dodgy people in the field. And I'm just kind of curious, as somebody who's very much in this field, and you formulated, I think, over 100 different supplements. Is that right?
500.
500. Shit. I was a little off by 5x, but what kind of percentage of supplements out there just don't live up to what they say, or said another way, don't have even the ingredients that they advertise on in the bottle?
At one point, I would say it was 90%, maybe 10 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
would say that there's been a trend towards more testing, more transparency, more straightforward labeling, a movement away from proprietary blends, which I'm just a huge
I laugh
hater
because
of.
that was one of your bullet points in the book.
Yeah. I can't stand them. But I would say now it's maybe 75% are not trustable, but there's there are really good brands out there that are consistent and that you can trust. And I do go through those in my book, and I would be glad to mention some of them here if you
Hmm.
want. But on the kind of cheaper end, some brands like Now and Jarrow and Doctor's Best and Nordic Naturals, and then like Thorne Life Extension Pure Encapsulations, Designs for Health. Like those are like some higher end ones that are consistent.
Hmm.
And those are the brands I would support, that they've been around for 20 years and they consistently test out, and they have ingredients that are full transparency. Like they list the ingredient, the form it's in, the plant part it's coming from, the dose of it, and the standardization. It's all there.
Hmm.
And so you can go look it up on examine.com or wherever you want to go, and you can say, does this dose, does this form, does what they claim make sense? And you can go look it up for yourself.
Hmm. And so, for the average person listening to this, when they're looking to evaluate a supplement, and just any particular supplement, obviously the brands is very helpful, and thank you for those suggestions. But just kind of uh, going through the list of maybe sort of the red flags, because the red flags make me laugh a little bit. You already mentioned one proprietary blend. What are some of the other red flags that cause you to, you as a formulator to cringe a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, to go into proprietary blends, just so people know, you could have like this proprietary blend with like 20 ingredients, let's say,
Hmm.
right? And it's 700 milligrams for the power and strength blend.
Hmm.
And it could be 699 milligrams for that first ingredient in that parentheses of your blend. And it could be 1 milligram for the other 19 ingredients. And it's just silly.
Hmm.
And yet you can list that, and people say, oh, it's got all the ingredients of all the things I've heard of that are good for building muscle, or for blood sugar, or whatever the product's for. But you may not be getting any of it. You're getting
Hmm.
that first ingredient pretty much, and that's the only thing I could guarantee you. And quite often that first ingredient is the cheapest ingredient. It's creatine or something, which they can be a great ingredient, but it's a cheap one.
Hmm.
And all the expensive ones are listed later. And that's done very intentionally. And you don't, when you list things in a prop blend, you don't have to get them tested in the same way when you have the dose and the form and everything, like the standardization listed out, and it's got to be at this level. You don't have as much wiggle room there. Like, so you have to test out at those levels. You have to send it out to a lab and show that your product is testing for a minimum of this. So I do not like proprietary blends. I think they're frustrating. I would love if we just didn't support products that have those and continue to move towards this full transparency. Another thing to look at is that, for example, let's say with ginseng, you want to look at that it's the right part of the plant. Sometimes they don't list what part. Sometimes they might say with ginseng, you want the root. That's where all the benefit is. So they might list something that's very cheap instead because it just says ginseng. They might list flower or plant or whole plant or whatever. And that's a red flag to me, obviously, is that, that they would do that. Another red flag would be that there isn't some standardization level for an herb. You
Hmm.
want it standardized to something like that we can, go back to studies and look and say, this is the active component. It's ginsenoside A. That's for, ginseng, or total
Hmm.
ginsenosides, or whatever it is. That's important.
Hmm.
Another one to look at is the structure function claims should be aligned with the research and not be like ludicrous. If you see, 880% more anything, just run from that product. Like those are ridiculous marketing claims that are just,
Hmm.
you can take something that did next to nothing and then compare it to something that did almost next to nothing. And that's an 880% difference.
Hmm.
It's not very applicable data. Like you can always manipulate data.
Hmm.
So I like looking at, the study was a quality study, that you can look up the dose and the form, and again, go to some place like examine.com and kind of do a deep dive on it. and that would be great. So just avoid stuff that the too good to be true claims.
Hmm.
And another thing to look at is make sure the expiration date is solid. Some people just pick up products. I like to look at when the expiration date is, and those companies should also do what's called stability testing, where they see that the product tests out, meets label claims at the end of expiration.
Hmm.
So if it's a 2-year expiration, the product should meet label claims when it's made, but also meet label claims at 2 years later.
Hmm.
That's where you have to actually do a lot of testing when you're formulating these products to make sure if there's nutrient interactions or things that happen in blending that you put in overages,
Hmm.
so that'll meet that full shelf life. And then you also do the stability work that's accelerated with heat and moisture, and you continue to test it out and say, okay, we need to tweak the formula so that it continues to meet label claims, and that's an ongoing process. So those are all things like, and you should be able to reach out to any of these companies and say, can I see your lot testing?
Hmm.
Can I hear about what your quality control is? All that stuff should be accessible. And if it isn't, then that's obviously a big red flag too. I mean, if you're willing to like double down and invest in a company, then I think these are good questions that you can call the company and ask. If you're going to give them, if you're like, Thorne is my company, I'm going all in on these guys, I'm going to, buy 4 products a month from them, that's thousands of dollars a year potentially. Like, you should give them a call and then feel comfortable with what they're doing.
Yeah. Uh, some great tips. Now, uh, the stability testing is an interesting one, and I'm certainly one that reaches out to these companies to the point where they sometimes get annoyed with me. But the stability testing, how frequently of these companies is it just sort of the best of breed that do stability testing, or do you find that more and more people are kind of getting on that trend?
I think it's more and more. It's growing. There's a lot more accountability that's happening now because consumers are asking for it. Because there's education by people like me and you putting that information out there. People are starting to demand it, and then also these supplement companies are getting bought by large food companies, by pharma companies, and they're risk averse. And they may not be as exciting of brands when they get bought out.
Mhm.
They may not be as edgy, but they do put good practices in place to make sure stuff tests out, to make sure that the legal claims are there, to make sure everything's squared away from that perspective, that there's a lot less risk and liability. So in that sense, I'm seeing that have a really good impact on what best practice is on the industry as a whole.
Mhm. Before we get into just one of my favorite topics, and I know one of the audience's favorite topics of cognitive enhancement, you have this section of the book, which I believe is called Formulator's Corner. And it goes through, in each chapter, you kind of take people through uh, some of your thoughts around supplementation and things. And one that always comes up when Shawn Wells is mentioned is apple cider vinegar. Uh, should people look at using apple cider vinegar in their kind of day-to-day life?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it sounds like it's, an old wives' tale, and it's kind of
Yeah.
hocus pocus, and that can't be as good as it is. Here's what I would say. One, apple cider vinegar, like all vinegars, contains acetic acid. Acetic acid is the shortest chain fatty acid there is, and it feeds the gut.
Hmm.
And acetate can help not only build ketones with acetoacetate and acetone, but also uh, when two are put together, you have like C4, the other short chain fatty acid butyrate, that is massive gut fuel.
Hmm.
There's also propionate, which is in between, which there's some new kind of data coming out on that's interesting with athletes and what they have in their gut. But butyrate and also butyrate goes to form beta hydroxybutyrate, again another ketone. So it's really interesting. Like, I love these short chain fatty acids, their interaction with not only gut health, and then of course brain health, gut brain axis, Butyrate is a postbiotic. That's how we're starting to talk about it, that comes from these probiotic bacterial strains. So butyrate is powerful, but acetate, acetic acid from the vinegar can fuel that gut, fuel the brain, and help with depression, mood, energy, all those things. And then from there, and lower blood sugar, improve blood pressure. That's what we're seeing with vinegar consistently. One thing I like about apple cider vinegar in particular is that it has the mother in it, and that's that swirly stuff at the bottom, that cloudy stuff.
Mhm.
That's all the acetobacteria. And again, that's feeding the gut. So I love this double shot for the gut. And people do see experientially a difference
Mhm.
of like all these things, and it seems almost too good to be true, but it's because of all the things I said it's impacting. It's a lot more than just a sour drink.
Mhm.
So that's what I'd say.
And how do you serve it? Like how do you work it into your day? Because, for me, I'll take a shot of it before I eat something, but
Mhm.
some people, and I'm just kind of curious, do you have like a Shawn Wells cocktail at home that has apple cider vinegar?
I do. I love it during fasting.
Hmm.
But I also, sometimes it gives you like that little zing that can kind of help you keep going. If
Hmm.
you're if you want something like, but you want to stay fasting, we could talk about how technical you are with like what's a fast, what's not a fast.
Hmm.
But I feel like, having a shot of that is fun sometimes. Um, but I typically I like using it how you're saying. If you're having a fatty meal, it's a great emulsifier of fat. It can help with digestion of that. Um, but I can add it to water sometimes. Like if it's too potent for you, if you don't like that taste, then just adding it to water, like taking one of those shots and just adding it to a full glass of water, it kind of makes it less acidic. And maybe that's easier for you being whoever's listening. So that would be what I'd suggest. But I like using it the same way as you.
Hmm. Okay, this is probably the number one question I was looking forward to asking you, by the way, Sean. There are gazillions of compounds out there in the world,
Mhm.
and you're looking at potential of formulation, and you've done over 500 of these now, as I found out earlier. But you are trying to narrow down a list of compounds that would work in particular situations. Can you take us through the process here? Because I imagine there's just endless infinitesimal amounts of research that you could be doing on these compounds. And so how do you narrow the field, if you will?
Yeah, and that reminds me of one thing I didn't mention with formulations is that the next level of formulation beyond what I was talking about, things that don't test out or making sure they do things right, a real formulation by a formulator means that each ingredient has a purpose and fulfills some specific mechanism of action, and it's the best one for that.
Hmm.
And that each ingredient has a synergy where they would work together and make sense put together. Not
Hmm.
just, oh, here's 10 ingredients that all affect blood sugar.
Hmm.
Okay, what is each one doing? Like, are they all working on the same mechanism of action? Why
Hmm.
did you include 10 of them?
Yeah.
There needs to be a thought process there. So that's
Or
part of like,
65 in some cases.
yeah. So that's part of the thought process there is like quite often I'll look at ingredients that, I want to see that there's data there, or I'm going to go find the data. Like this ingredient is very similar and it looks like, in terms of biochemistry, in terms of organic chemistry, this ingredient is very similar in how this ingredient works, but maybe because it has this methyl group or whatever, it's going to work a little bit better. That's theoretical, but I'm going to work with my partner in China, where he has over 100 scientists, a 400,000 square foot facility that's GMP, and I'm able to create these ingredients in like weeks, and like I can like try them out within weeks, and I'll quite often I'll try them out on myself, and,
Hmm.
I'm the lab rat, And but we can do animal research. He has a lab for that. And then I have two partners in the United States that are German scientists, very accomplished. Dr. Ralph Jaeger, Dr. Martin Purpura. They've done hundreds of studies, worked with all kinds of labs, worked with all kinds of branded ingredient companies on things like HMB, alpha GPC, PKTP, all these kinds of ingredients. And that's part of it. Is like I'll come up with this idea, I'll run it by the team. I want to see is it feasible on the manufacturing side with my Chinese partner?
Mhm.
Is it, does it have stability? Can it be made for a realistic price? Will we do enzymatic or fermentation or synthetic? How are we making it,
Mhm.
and the raw materials that go into making it? And then with my other partners, like looking at, what is the research around it? What is the intellectual property around it? Like, what could we say if we come out with this? Like, how could we research this
Mhm.
and create more intellectual property? That's largely what I'm doing now. Is I've actually moved away from typically formulating. I do still some for some very significant partners, but mostly I've been focusing on intellectual property and novel ingredients. So that's what I'm looking at, is like I want it to have logic and rationale in terms of that organic chemistry, biochemistry. It's working on a pathway that pharmaceuticals looking to exploit. Um, something like that. Like I'm looking at brown adipose tissue, and I don't know, like PGC1 alpha, and whatever I'm looking at, and like does this ingredient potentially do that? And then that's what we're exploring together as a team. So it's that kind of stuff. It's really fun. I really, really enjoy it.
So at this point in your career, how many patents do you have on various different ingredients?
Over 10 right now, but there's several more. There's about 10 more that have been filed recently. So it's probably about 20, and there's probably about 20 more that are kind of in motion probably this year. So a lot.
Very cool. Sounds like the team is very busy.
Mm-hmm. Very much. But it's exciting. Like, recently, some of the ingredients we've been working on that I can talk about, like L-beta, beta amino isobutyric acid. It's an exercise mimetic.
Mhm.
And, similar to the drugs like ACAR or GW 501516, I believe.
Is that ostarine, or what's the other name for it? I can't remember.
No, cardarine.
There
I
you
think
go.
it is.
Okay.
Yeah. I think ostarine is like S4, like a SARM.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this mimics exercise, which we can't go out and say in the supplement world because the FDA states that you need to say with healthy diet and exercise. But what I can say, and we're getting the data around this now, and we're showing that it's elevated in plasma when you take it orally, all this stuff. And we're getting GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe, which means all the toxicology work. There's a lot that goes into all this.
Mhm.
But we can say that it's an exercise augmenter, like where you're getting more out of each rep and each step. Like I'm trying to not promote the idea of like you can just sit on your couch and reap the benefits, which is
Although there's a certain amount of people that would
possible.
love that, right?
Right, exactly. But I like the idea of it being an augmenter. And
Mhm.
another ingredient, L-ergothioneine, has been really fun as well. We have this ergothioneine transporter in our body just for this ingredient. And
Mhm.
we have storage of this ingredient in our body. And this is just crazy for me to find. They were actually considering whether it should be like a vitamin or not, similar to
Yeah.
PQQ. And it protects the mitochondria and has a
Mhm.
lot to do with the immune health and all these things. And it's fascinating, this ingredient. So we've been working on that. And it's just super small doses, like 5 to
Mhm.
10 milligrams we're talking about of this amino acid. So it's very interesting because it does have this transporter. You only need very tiny doses. So it's absolutely fascinating. And so I love this stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about cognitive enhancement, because it's a topic that everybody listening to this show seems to love. And I know you've even got a section of the book discussing nootropics in general. But given just sort of your vast knowledge and experience in this space, what do you kind of look at and say this is sort of the current frontier or best of breed cognitive enhancers? And I know that there's kind of different categories, and you lay this out very beautifully in the book, but how do you look at cognitive enhancement ingredients right now? And what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, there's a lot of places that you can cover. I mean, there's peptides like dihexa or cerebrolysin. There's
Mhm.
these plant medicines like psilocybin
Yeah.
that are going to enhance BDNF, the
Mhm.
neuroplasticity in the brain, right? Um, and
Or
then
even
there's a
like
lot of
ketamine, right? Ketamine
ketamine,
has.
yeah. And there's, drugs that are certainly like I take Provigil or Nuvigil from time to time.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously that's a great nootropic. And then there's these gray market compounds, these different race tams and things like cooleracetam and paracetam and all these different things, Noopept, which I do mention in the book. But I tried in the book to really focus because this is meant for more mainstream. My next book, I think I'm going to go into peptides, plant medicines, and biologics,
Mhm.
which will be like more hardcore, like I think a longevity focused book that's kind of taking this step forward past where I think this book is. But I wanted this book to be accessible. So I mostly describe stuff that you can buy easily and is healthy and has very clear demonstrated scientific validity. So I think any nootropic stack has to be built around a choline, like a really good choline source, which would be something like CDP choline, or my favorite one is alpha GPC.
Mhm.
And that has the ability to pass by the blood-brain barrier. Choline forms acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, which you burn through quite a bit of, like when you're focused in these, kind of nootropic, these cognitive enhancement states. And then also your brain is made up of these fats that need like phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, all these phospholipids. So it has dual benefit, and I'm just a huge fan of choline. And unless you're eating eggs every day or taking a supplement with choline in it every day, you're not getting enough choline. They've shown that. So
Mhm.
I think it's really good to build that as your foundation. And then from there, I would look at some of the key methylators associated with neuroconduction, like things like 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, the active form of folate, methylcobalamin, the active form of B12. Uh, I do like Noopept as a race tam. It's more accessible than most of the others and a
Mhm.
lot less complicated and a really low dose. It's 10 to 30 milligrams a day. Start with 10, work your way up, see what you think. I don't like stacking a bunch of race tams. I think with anything nootropic, there's a discussion in my book, like in that first chapter you're talking about like bio individuality and kind of figuring out your own stack. This is like 10x is true in nootropics.
Yeah.
If you look at anyone's stack, if you go to Reddit or wherever, every single person's stack is different. You cannot just jump in and take someone's stack that they built out over 2 or 3 years.
So it must drive you nuts, because it drives me nuts when you kind of see these Facebook forums where people are like, what do you think of my stack? And then they list 10 different things or whatever, because in reality, if it works for them, it works for them. It may not work for me, right?
Especially with neurotransmitters, like it's just people are so different. So, some things that are, enlightening and energizing for some might give you brain fog and headaches.
Hmm.
It just doesn't. And maybe it will work for you if slow dosed, ramped up over time with just one thing, but
Hmm.
you have to give it time. Like you can't just go right into like this full on stack. Like it's really good to do the one thing at a time, the scientific method, evaluate what it's doing for you. Is it working for me? Is it not? Okay, let me go on to the next thing, instead of just throwing the kitchen sink at it, which obviously doesn't work too well.
Hmm.
Um, Another thing that I would mention that is very cognitive enhancing would be raising ketone levels. And there's a
Hmm.
variety of ways to do that. You can do that obviously with intermittent and especially extended fasting. You can do that with a ketogenic diet, especially the lower carb you go, the
Hmm.
higher the ketones will be. So doing like a zero carb or carnivore is going to like elicit the highest ketones. Then you can use exogenous ketones like the salts or esters. You can use C8 MCTs, caprylic acid MCTs. Those are going to elicit the most ketones. And you can use things like berberine or dihydroberberine as a glucose disposal agent to kind of hasten that.
Hmm.
And then you can also do glycogen depletion exercise, where you're like things like HIIT, high intensity interval training, will deplete glycogen very quickly and help you get into that state where you're, starting to use ketones and ketones are elevated. But those are great for the brain. The brain loves ketones, and can be quite healing when you shift away from, especially like if you've had trauma to the brain, like a traumatic brain injury. Uh, that area can be very similar in research, it's found, to like an Alzheimer's type brain where it's insulin resistant in those cells, those brain cells. So providing that alternate fuel source can, surpass that mitochondrial dysfunction, and provide that fuel source, that energy to make ATP, the cellular energy source. So you're no longer in that insufficient cellular energy state in your brain. So that can be healing to your brain to have the ketones and switch off from the glucose. And of course, like if you have neurodegenerative diseases or have a tendency towards those, it's definitely something to look at as well. Is you don't need to stay on keto year round. I'm just saying, like, do some things to raise ketones from time to time, like whether it's a ketogenic diet here and there, a couple times a year for several months, or whether it's doing extended or intermittent fasting in your schedule, doing glycogen depletion, taking a glucose disposal agent like metformin or berberine or dihydroberberine. Things like that are going to be good for your long-term brain health, especially when we're exposed to high glycemic carbohydrate. We're not moving enough, we're not fasting enough, all those kinds of things. So those can all be helpful at raising ketones. The last thing I'd say is what we were talking about before is increasing BDNF
Hmm.
and increasing vascularity, vasodilation would be the polyphenol group. I feel is just powerful, just across the board in all aspects of anti-aging,
Hmm.
oxidation, glycation, inflammation, methylation, like activating the sirtuin genes. I mean, they're CR mimetics, caloric restriction mimetics.
Hmm.
Like the polyphenols, it's just an amazing group. And if you look at like all these um, blue zone cultures, they all have like these polyphenol, it's the olive oil and the red wine, and
Yeah.
you look at this, it's the cacao and it's the green tea, and it's very interesting to look at, like all these foods and beverages are high in polyphenols,
Hmm.
and they have a much greater propensity to pan out versus typical antioxidant supplementation,
Hmm.
which is the data is very conflicting on.
Hmm.
And I love polyphenols for this. And so most of the polyphenols also have been shown to increase that neuroplasticity, the BDNF,
Hmm.
um, which as we age, we have a crystallized intelligence and a fluid intelligence. And the crystallized intelligence is how we can actually get smarter as we age. We get better and better at the shortcuts, right? Like, take that same way to work, and like the 50th time, like you're like dialed, like every nuance.
Hmm.
And that's how we get smarter as we age. But we get quote unquote dumber as we age with the fluid intelligence, where the ability to take on new tasks. And that's where it's important to take your polyphenols, to raise ketones, to challenge your brain with brain games, or with taking different ways to work, or learning a new instrument or a new language, or you know using your belt the opposite way, or holding your brush with the opposite hand, or
Hmm.
doing this stuff like to keep it confusing and fresh,
Hmm.
helps your brain stay more neuroplastic. But so do these polyphenols that would be very helpful as you age. And some examples of those polyphenols, things like quercetin, which you would find in like apples and onions, EGCG, which you find in green tea. Um, let's see, resveratrol, trans-resveratrol, which you find in red wine. Coffee berry, which you find in coffee, which is chlorogenic acid, is typically one of the polyphenols in there. Pterostilbene from blueberries. So like these are, as you start thinking about this, you're like, oh, like these are the things like these cultures like thrive on and live on and like our staples. These are like powerful things that help with our staying young. So I would, if I was to like recommend like one group of things to really focus on, it's these polyphenols.
Amazing. Shawn, let's get into the book, because we've kind of dabbled and hinted at it for people today. But the energy formula, do you mind just breaking down for us what energy actually stands for in this case? Because it's an acronym, and I would love to just have people understand a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's the energy formula, and I was trying to figure out like what all of this work for me in my life revolved around. And I could talk about biohacking, I could talk about keto and supplements and exercise and all these different things, the labs I was getting, but it all revolved around me wanting to have more energy, more vitality, more just not feeling, I know chronic fatigue syndrome, I know obesity, I know inflammation and pain, I know not being able to get out of bed, I know suicidal thoughts and depression, I know not feeling like I'm enough, I know hating myself. And so like the energy formula just felt right for me. And then I kind of constructed this acronym that is experiment, for the first E. And that's that whole biohacking and bioindividuality and figuring out what really for you and using that scientific method and not trying to just apply things that work for other people. That can be directional, it can be informative, but that may not work for you. And the book goes through like how to properly employ that. Um, the next one would be nutrition, and I get into paleo and carnivore, vegan, like go through all those things and what might work for you. Certainly, I can tell you without a doubt that ultra processed food is something that you should move away from. And I think everyone should agree on that. And I think people that argue over, vegan being the healthiest diet, and then some people are saying carnivore, and it seems so opposite, right? And counterintuitive. But I think when I hear that, I'm just like, yes, those are whole food. Cool. We agree on that.
Yeah.
Animals have been living for millions of years on either. So, yep, carnivore, vegan, cool. It's the bullshit that's come along in the last 50 years that's garbage and making us sick, and is the reason that America, despite having amazing healthcare and disposable income and supposedly the best of everything, we're ranked so low in the world when it comes to our health and our mortality. I would say a big reason is, food availability, and then the ultra processed food. Like we have too much food available too easily. Yeah. So we don't fast, so we don't have to work for it. We don't have to put much thought into it. We can just say, this is what I want right now, and I think that's good, and get it. But ultra processed food for sure. And not only is it ultra processed, which seems unhealthy with the GMOs and the antibiotics and the artificial flavors, sweeteners, colors, and all the things that are in it, all these chemicals, but it's meant to be manipulative. There's something in it called bliss point. And they engineer these foods so that you overeat them. They override satiety, and they trigger dopamine and serotonin in your brain. It's like explosion orgasm. And that's why we're overeating these foods. So I get into all that kind of stuff. And then the next one is exercise. I get into exercise hacks, things like you probably do know of high intensity interval training, but you might not know intraset stretching and blood flow restriction and some of these other fun hacks that are really good to know that can get more. Then I get into routines, like some morning and nighttime routines. And, that's a massive part of success is just, you set the pace for your day with a morning routine. Tim Ferriss found in Tools of Titans that successful people all had two things in common. They were experimenters, which I talk about in that first chapter. They don't view things as win or fail. They view things as win or learn. And I will continue to experiment. So win or learn means it's a reframe. And that's what some other people have noted, that successful people all have that reframing mentality in mind. And I'll get to that in my next chapter that I'll talk about in a second. But the other thing that these successful people had that Tim Ferriss found was morning routines.
Mm-hmm.
They're really good at starting their day successfully, dialed, planning, starting it with a presence, a mindfulness, not feeling like rushed and out of control and like the day is happening to you. That you are in control, that you planned out your day, looking for things to come up, but it won't steer your entire day and steer you into oblivion. So it's a very different mindset. And we get into all that and get into the nighttime routines that help you set like very good sleep hygiene, it's called, and where you have like consistent bedtime and you have a sleep fortress and all those kinds of things, and how you prepare your mind for the night. The next one, like I was saying, that reframing mentality that's so important with success and happiness, that's in the growth chapter. And we also get into intermittent or extended. That's a big one, is as you know, the obstacle is the way, like Ryan. So like, we're wishing for no obstacle. We're not wishing for a shortcut around the obstacle. We realize that the obstacle is the way. And that is the idea of hormesis too, biologically, that we challenge ourselves, and then, that agitation leads to adaptation, right? But it has to be the goal. That's thing that I get into in the book is like that Goldilocks zone, and positive stress, which is called eustress, not distress, where it's training too much. And that's where you can look at like HRV and have your wearables and all that, and make sure that you're recovered enough. There's actually, there's a term that I like that's come up more recently with research has talked about overtraining for years with athletes. But I like the term, there's a newer term that's under recovered. It's a different way to look at the same idea. And then the last one is your tribe. And that's really talking about community. And again, going back to those blue zones where I've been to like Sardinia several times, for example, and they spend 3-4 hours having dinner. They prepare the meal, they connect, they open up, they commune. And it's a very different feeling than just rushing through a meal and shoving food into your face. And I actually have some theories that psychosomatically, that we're triggering our body for, sympathetic nervous system activation when we're eating, because we're eating while we're watching, Game of Thrones with like sex and violence. We're eating while we're in the car, shoving food in our face, weaving in and out of traffic. We're eating while we're at work out of a vending machine, and we're under heavy stress, and we need that monster in the honey bun. What is the act of eating that you're training your body for? You're training it for stress. And it's very different from the way they eat. And psychosomatically, like they're approaching it to like parasympathetic, like they're ready to relax for 3 or 4 hours at the table and talk. And yes, they have a glass, but they're having it while they're de-stressing, while they're talking, and they're sipping it. And it's a very different experience than just pounding some wine. So it's hard to tease that out, as like the culture is very different. They slow down. They're not looking at their phones when they're talking to each other. So that's some of what I get into in the energy formula. It has like 70 full color diagrams, over 100 scientific citations, surveys that help you out through the book, like where you're at and where you're going, so you can judge your success. All that kind of stuff is in there. So I'm really proud of this book. It has a lot of my stories, like you talked about. So it's very personal. But talking about, like, they go into the supplements, the forms, the doses, the brands, and then resource hacks in each chapter gets into all the stuff with devices and apps and all those kinds of recommendations. So it's just loaded with stuff you can use. You can go to energyformula.com and see everything about it. And I would love it if you support it. It's only 99 cents as an ebook, which is dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And I just want people to have it in their hands. And I'll come out with a hardcover that's $39.99, but that's literally cost me $39.80 to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm doing a recording next week in LA on the book, so that'll be out soon too. But it's literally a labor of love. I just want people to have it and benefit from it. This is my gift to the world. Like, that's all it's about. Like, I didn't take any money from any of the brands that are mentioned in there. I wanted it to be completely honest information, and I'm just proud of that. I'm proud of what I'm putting out.
And I was telling you before we clicked record, Shawn, that, the first chapter alone is worth purchasing for people, in the sense that you walk through how to, if you think about just what the basic person spends on supplements, right, every year, and that could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, in certain cases, how to select those supplements, what brands to get into, and then just kind of taking us through what some of the best of breeds are in these various categories. That to me is just well worth. I mean, it's only 99 cents. Like, why not buy it? But like, you did put a lot of work into this. I can tell it, and it's fantastic. So thank you for putting together the book.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you. Like, that's like one of the most nerve-wracking things, is like when your peers like judge it, and it's like, well, will it be okay? And yeah, I'm proud of it. There's so much attention to detail here that it took 2 years to really hone this thing in. So I'm very proud of it, and it means a lot that you like it.
Shawn Wells, where can people find out more about you, your work? You already mentioned where to get the book, but where can people learn more about you?
ShawnWells.com, ShawnWells. And then I'm at Shawn Wells, same spelling, on Instagram. And I'm starting to get into Clubhouse. That's been an interesting one of late. I'm just at biohacking on there. So that's been fun. A lot of great conversations with great people that are on our level. And it's really fun just having these almost like, these panels that, I love, like when we're at conferences, when those used to happen. Like, it's nice to have like these expert panels and just talk with each other as experts, and it's fun to work through these things. So I've enjoyed that. But those would be the best places to find me, and I appreciate anyone supporting the book and telling their friends about it. It's obviously, I think, a great value, a great deal at the price you can get it at. I don't think 99 cents should be a barrier at this point. It'll go up after launch, but I definitely appreciate people supporting it. And if they go to energyformula.com, I also have a hidden chapter that's also free, that's on movement, natural movement, which I think is very important. I mean, animals don't work out. I'm definitely for working out, but I get into like how natural movement should be built into our day. And then I have a fasting guide, fasting for energy, that is free as well. That goes into depth on fasting. So those things are free if you go to energyformula.com. If you go straight to Amazon, you won't get those free things, but I appreciate the support no matter what. And I obviously appreciate your support, because you're amazing. And it's so awesome to be on the show and talk to you. And it's been a complete pleasure, Boomer. I love all the people that have recommended me to you. And it's like, wow, then this guy's really, really awesome. So, and you have been, and I'm excited to develop the friendship more.
Likewise, and I think this is just the first of many conversations. And Shawn, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure just learning from you and hearing all these stories. And whenever you want, the mic is always yours. You're welcome back. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, brother.
To all superhumans listening out there, have an epic day.